When you hear Reactionless Quickswap team, you're probably thinking, well, that sounds stupid. Why would you not use reactions? Honestly, I felt the same way until I tried it, and now it's probably my favorite comp by a large margin, so I decided to make a guide for it. Also, the fact that Venti just had a rerun and potential future reruns made me think now is a great time to do so. However, I'm not a content creator or anything and learned how to edit videos from Google, so this guide may be a bit lackluster, but I wanted to share this comp because I couldn't find a single showcase for this specific team, a double Anemo, double Geo squad that consists of Zhongli, Albedo, Jean, and Venti. After the intro, there's a showcase of this comp on both sides of floors 11 and 12 with full star clears, and yes, you'll notice right off the bat it is all 5-star heroes, but I will cover some 4-star replacements a bit later. On screen, there's also a brief summary of some of the acronyms I used throughout the guide in case you're not familiar. If you're not interested in the full guide, please check the description below for timestamps of the build summary and Abyss showcase. But for now, I want to go over why I completely simped for this comp. It's not only versatile and generalizable, but it has to be the most mechanically simple, brain-dead comp imaginable. What do I mean? It is the perfect comp for lazy gits like me, because it requires no animation cancelling, no dodging, very little repositioning, no running from any mechanics, no worrying about HP or healing, no worrying about shield breakers, and even no thinking for the most part. This comp, in my opinion, is able to deal with any Abyss situation I can imagine, past, present, and the foreseeable future. Now, you might be pretty skeptical at this point because it makes no sense that a reactionless team could deal with pretty much every situation and shield, but it is surprisingly effective. It's similar in this regard to the double Anemo, double Geo Zhao comp without having to rely on a greedy and selfish hypercarry. The reason it deals with shields so fast is that you're simply constantly spamming E's and Q's, and for whatever reason, Jean E, Albedo Q, and Zhongli Q just rip apart shields. This includes shields from Abyss Mages, Slimes, all kinds of Hilly Chels, and Geo shields. The only problematic shields are potentially for 2E, but you'll see in the showcase that if you chain crowd controls or CCs on them, then you can burst them down pretty quickly regardless. On top of which, Zhongli and Jean are both excellent at interrupting their shield casting. Moreover, all 4 of these heroes are very strong in their own right and arguably some of the most future-proof heroes in the game, as you can easily fit them in as supports in most future comps. You'll also never need to swap any of the heroes out for different Abyss iterations, which makes hyper-investing in them much easier to justify. Finally, the team works well even with every hero at Constellation 0. Before we move on screen you'll find a summary of the builds and weapons as a quick reference in case you want to tune out all the explanations that follow and skip ahead to the Abyss showcase. By now you might be thinking, wow, I'm a lazy git too, this sounds perfect, what's the catch? Well, as mentioned before, it does use 4 5-star heroes. However, only Venti and Zhongli in my opinion are necessary. Jean is the least necessary of all the heroes. You'll notice in the showcases later that the only time this comp took any damage at all was in 11-3 second half, when I forgot to refresh Zhongli's shield on accident and Jean and Venti took maybe 1k damage each. However, normally this comp takes 0 damage so you can get by without a healer. You can replace Jean with any unit that has a 6-second or lower cooldown E and low cooldown Q that can hit inside Venti's ult. Right off the top of my head, the best 4-star replacement is probably Bennett, although his Q doesn't actually hit in Venti's ult. Even so, replacing Jean with Bennett for me increased the clear times of every chamber on average by 9 to 10 seconds, but that's probably just Bennett being broken. The Venti mains Discord has a list of all E's and Q's that can hit during Venti's ult, so check it out for some other heroes that could fit into this team. Albedo is a bit harder to replace since you do not want to lose Geo Resonance. The only alternative at the moment is Geo Traveler. You'll lose Albedo's nice synergy with Venti's ult, but you gain a massive amount of synergy between Geo Traveler and Zhongli. With 3 constructs and Geo Traveler's ult active, you can get 7 pillar resonances going at the same time, and you can modify the build to maximize this damage. Geo Traveler also generates a lot more particles than Albedo, further lowering the overall energy recharge requirements of all 4 units, especially Zhongli. Another downside of this comp is that you'll likely never get those showcase sub 15 second single chamber speed clears that Melt, Vape, and other reaction comps can do. However, my current comp is still hitting 30 to 45 seconds per chamber on floors 11 and 12, and still has lots of room to improve on both gear and talents. Furthermore, you do also have to invest in 4 units rather than just 1 carry, but you don't need as high a crit ratio on any 1 unit. Mainly, it is leveling all E's and Q's up to at least 8, and all artifacts to at least 16 or 20 that is the biggest struggle. In my opinion though, the benefits outweigh the downsides. The crit ratio requirement is typically lower than carries, you never have to reset or swap heroes, and it's the most brain dead gameplay. By now, most players should be well past the point of cheap deeps teams anyway. Now, let's get into the Abyss showcase, during which I will go over the rotations, general Abyss strats, and builds. I've done a lot of my own maths and calculations specific to this Quickswap playstyle for the weapons, so I'll be giving you my recommendations based on that. The showcase starts with this comp on the second halves of both floors 11 and 12, as I believe this half is best suited to this team, mostly because Sis and Mage Flies in the first half can mess up ult aiming, and the Rune Graders in 12-3 second half can easily be knocked down by Zhongli and Albedo. However, I also included the showcase of this team on the first half of both floors afterwards, as you can easily use this comp in either half. Before I get into builds, let's discuss the general rotation, which is super straightforward. First, you want to primarily cycle between 3 E's, Albedo E, Jean E, and Venti E. Zhongli's E just does too little damage, and as you might notice in the showcase, I personally am too lazy to pay attention if enemies are staying within the pillar resonance area. Instead, you want to just use the other 3 E's as your main rotation. Start with Albedo E, immediate swap to Jean E, immediate swap to Venti E, and then stay on field with Venti for a tiny bit so Venti can collect both Jean's E particles and his own E particles. This allows Venti to need lower ER than usual. Since only Venti is waiting for particles, the rotation itself is very fast, less than 6 seconds. In between the triple E rotation, you want to use ults whenever they are available, and always use Zhongli's hold E right before you use his ult, assuming you do not have C2, which takes care of shielding. Now, this rotation has 2 general variations. The first is whenever you're facing enemies that can be CC'd by Venti, such as most of floors 9, 10, 11, and 12-2. Here you can use ults as they come off cooldown, although I prefer to toss Zhongli's ult and Albedo's ult into Venti's ult. Remember, Jean's ult does not hit into Venti's ult, so you want to use it when Venti's ult is not active. However, everyone's E's and the rest of the Q's can all hit in Venti's ult. The second variation is against bigger enemies that Venti's ult cannot CC alone. In this case, you want to build up both Zhongli's ult and Venti's ult together instead of using them on cooldown. If you don't have Zhongli's C2, then first cast his hold E, then use Zhongli's ult to lock down big enemies, and immediately follow it by switching to Venti, taking a short step back and casting Venti's ult. Make sure not to waste time turning around as Venti will do it automatically. Finally, run back into enemies so they do not run out of Venti's ult. Since you're shielded, it won't matter if you fight right in the middle of them. You'll notice this change in playstyle throughout 12-1 and 12-3 in the showcase. Zhongli's petrification has the added benefit of causing larger enemies to slowly be dragged by Venti's ult. I believe only Ruin Guards and Graders cannot be dragged this way. By now, you've probably also noticed that I mess up these rotations. A lot. Let's just say I am mechanically lacking. Maybe I was nervous from recording gameplay for the first time, but I frequently swap to the wrong hero, which you'll notice when I stand there doing nothing as I mash E wondering why it's not working. And I often miss abilities completely, like Jean Z. Used abilities in the wrong order, forgot to use ults that were ready, the list goes on and on. I originally wanted to keep redoing it until everything was perfect and I achieved the best possible clear times I could. But after running through it, I realized there's a reason why I used this lazy team. I didn't redo it because leaving all the mistakes in just proves how brain dead this comp really is. It is 100% not because I'm lazy and recording perfect gameplay seems like a lot of work. Moving on. I also wanted to go over general Abyss strats before diving into all the build details, so you can better understand the showcase. For floors 9 through 11, the gameplay is fairly straightforward. With enough investment, you can basically YOLO your way through these floors. This will always be true on any floors with enemies that Venti can CC. For Abyss Mage Shields, you'll notice how well this comp takes care of them in the showcase during 11-1 first half against the Hydra Abyss Mage. Slimes are even easier since they get CC'd by Venti even with their shields on. Try to always position Venti on the side so he can aim his ult towards the middle of enemy groups. Remember, you do not need to turn around to face enemies. All abilities will automatically target nearest enemies. Basically, for every chamber, you want to get Venti's ult off as soon as you can. Once you get one off, you will generate so many HP based energy orbs that you can pretty much perma-CC everything from then on. For 11-2, try to make sure to go into it at the start with either Venti or Zhongli's ult ready. This will make it dramatically easier as you'll notice in the showcase. I mostly ignored the Engulfing Storms debuff in floor 11. The Slowing Waters debuff in the next Abyss probably won't be an issue either. Just try to cleanse before using Venti's Q whenever you can. For floor 12, you might have assumed that Venti sucks here because his CC doesn't quote-unquote work. You'll notice though that as long as you marginally adjust your rotations as previously described and turn on your brain ever so slightly, it's still pretty simple. In fact, this comp has better clear times in every chamber except 11-1 second half and 12-1 both halves than any of my carry comps. Do note though that I don't use Hu Tao or Ganyu, so I don't know how timings will compare to those beast level mega carries. Still, the point of this comp is to enable lazy gameplay, not beat broken heroes like Ganyu. The builds themselves are also straightforward. You pretty much build almost everyone for damage. Venti by far does the lion's share of DPS in the group, and you want to give him the best of the best. 2 Venera, 2 Noblesse, or 2 Venera, 2 Gladiator is the way to go here. But if you swap out any units for heroes with absorbable elements, then 4 Venera is better. Typically, you can just use whatever has better substats there. For main stats, go attack Sands, Anemo Cup, and crit helm, and substat priority is crit first, then attack, then ER, and finally EM last. ER only needs to be around 155 in this comp, and remember, Venti gets 32% ER at max ascension, so a few substats is enough. For weapons, Venti has the highest requirement as you really want a Harp, Alley Hunter, or Stringless in that order. The current banner is great to snag a weapon for Venti as it has both his best in slot and second best in slot on rate up, but of course always spend responsibly. Out of all the heroes, he's the only one who needs a really good weapon in my opinion, although if you cannot get any of these, Viridescent Hunt and Amos are fine. If you cannot get those either, then any weapon with a damage subset like crit or attack works, and Sacrificial Bow as well since you get 2 E's. Jean is built like Venti with an attack Sands, Anemo Cup, and crit helm. 2 Venera, 2 Glad is best, but 2 Venera with 3 random pieces is fine. Again, use whatever has the most crit subsets. ER is mostly unnecessary because the comp generates so many animal particles. Substat priority is crit, then attack, then ER. For weapons, Jade Cutter, Summit Shaper, and Festering Desire are some of the better options. Even though my Jean uses Shaper, when I did the maths, it was only a couple thousand more damage per E than R5 Festering Desire even at full stats. I'm actually contemplating swapping her back to Festering Desire because a couple thousand damage per E is probably not worth losing 46% ER. If for some reason you didn't obtain Festering Desire, you can use any sword with the crit or attack subset, sack sword for the 2 E's, or a high refinement alley flash since you never take any damage in this comp. Albedo is fairly simple for this comp as well. Having done the maths again, whether you have him at C0 or C2, you build him exactly the same way as this option is the most DPS regardless. Assuming every 12 seconds you're using 2 press E's, a minimum of 6 transient blossom procs, and 1 Q with an average of 2 fatal blossoms hitting every enemy, you want to build Albedo with the defense Sands, Geo Cup, and crit helm using an R5 Harbinger of Dawn. R5 Harbinger beats out every other 4 and 5 star sword for this specific comp, with the exception of Jade Cutter. It is relatively easy to get as well, so I won't bother mentioning any alternative weapons. Substat priorities are crit, then defense percent, and finally attack percent. ER is unnecessary here. Zhongli's build is a bit more complicated than the others. As discussed, this comp is sometimes reliant on Zhongli's ult to lock big enemies in place for Venti's ult, especially on floor 12. This means needing a bit of ER since Albedo and Zhongli don't generate very many geoparticles between them. I also prefer having one piece with HP main stat to make his shields a bit tankier and never fall off, as his shield is vital to both geo resonance and resistance shredding. At 23.5k HP, my Zhongli shield is more than enough to never take damage on this comp. Thus, I went ER Sands, HP Cup, and crit helm. However, for max damage you want to go attack Sands, Geo Cup, and crit helm, and for good damage with a slightly tankier shield, you can go HP Sands instead of attack. I plan on toying with both these options to check if it makes a difference once I get time. If you're using Geo Traveler instead of Albedo, or using an ER weapon, you probably want to use an attack or HP Sands instead of an ER Sands. Substat priority is crit, then either attack or ER depending on your weapon and Sands, and finally HP percent. For weapons, from best to worst for this comp are Homer, Primordial Jade, Deathmatch R2 and above, and finally Vortex. You can, however, literally use any weapon except those with an EM or physical damage subset. For talents, you want to be leveling everyone's E's and Q's as high as possible, while the auto attack talent can be left at level 1. But in terms of priority, focus first Venti's Q and Zhongli's Q, then Venti's E, Albedo's E, and Jean's E. After that, probably Zhongli's E for stronger shield, and lastly, Albedo's Q and Jean's Q. The vast majority of damage in this comp comes from Venti and then Albedo, so they are the priority, with the exception of Zhongli's Q for an increased CC duration, which has to be crowned for the max duration. If you're using any other heroes, you should be able to use all this info as general guidelines for a lot of other Quickswap teams, particularly double element comps. As for my own squad, I would say there's still a ton of room for improvement. Both Venti and Albedo's weapons are level 90, while Zhongli's and Jin's are level 80 because I'm not sure if I want to swap them for Deathmatch and Festering Desire or not. Everyone's sands, goblets, and helmets are level 20 with flowers and feathers at 16. The crit ratios, however, are pretty abysmal in my opinion. Most of them around 40-90 or 50-100 without weapons. Harbinger and Harp, however, improved Albedo's and Venti's crit ratios dramatically. Attack is around 1400 to 1900 for everyone, and Albedo's defense is 1500. I should note that I did crown Zhongli's Q and Venti's E and Q talents. Everything else is level 8. During my first Abyss run, however, with this comp, Albedo and Jin was still level 60 Ascension 4, and everyone's gear was level 16. Venti was using a Stringless, and Jin the Festering Desire. And the comp still managed to get clear times around 40 seconds to 1 minute 15 seconds, which I think is pretty good for that level of investment. I only started building this comp when Venti was rerun as I didn't have him before, and probably spent around 25 to 30 saved up fragile resins on the whole team at the time to farm their gear, which isn't much for an entire team. Point is, the investment is not as steep as you'd think given most players probably have lots of resources at this stage. Well, that pretty much covers it. Feel free to send me any questions or comments, and happy mindless quick swapping to everyone.